he starts to go upstairs with my child. I follow him. I get in there, and he's screaming and rocking back and forth like a crazy person with the infant, and the head is flopping back and forth. And I am so ass-kissed. If you've ever had like a hostage situation, you'll do whatever you have to do.
Mindy Lee, are you ready for this?
I'm here and present in my body and mind.
I'm so grateful that you are welcoming me into your space as we're getting a little bit more personal as you come into my space. You and I have known each other for quite some time. We met at a retreat and you sat your ass down right in this empty seat next to me during a meal. And I was like, this woman is crazy, but I like it. And so I don't know what it was, but I was like, I need more. And yeah, we became fast friends. And quickly, I also felt like there was a lot that I could learn from you. And you, in the years that I have known you, have taught me a lot. You've taught me a lot about the mind, body, spirit connection in ways where I definitely had in the past, like I would say orthorexic tendencies, like many people in the world that we are in. So a little bit about that. Do you want to kind of give a little intro as to what your specialty is? Because I think it's quite unique.
Well, my specialty is pretty much whoever's sitting in front of me, as far as pertaining to health. People are on different levels of awareness, and you have to meet that where they're at. So when you said you were orthorexic, you were clinging on to a ideology and a method that had worked for you. And so that had worked for you, and now it was time to outgrow it. So I just offer different ways of thinking about things, different possibilities. Potential. I like to see the potentials in people and guide them to the quickest and most effective way for them to achieve their goal, whatever their goal would be. I know that sounds vague, but everybody is completely different. Not everybody wants to heal the way that everybody else wants to heal. Mm-hmm. So I go with the flow, try to feel into them and see what they want and what I'm invited to share, and then meet somewhere in the middle.
And you're an incredible teacher, because I think that there are many teachers out there who, sure, there's clinical practice out there, which you have, but being able to have clinical practice and having had gone through the practices yourself, you practice what you preach. And that, to me, is what makes it separates the good from the great in their craft. And your story is special in the sense that you've gone through the ringer, if you will. And the ringer is I think impactful for many to hear, which is essentially why I wanted to rally us together and share this as for the women out there in particular who I think could have some healing that is done just by virtue of listening to this. So I want to rewind a little bit, and I want to talk about the beginning for you. What led you down the path of wanting to heal yourself? What makes Mindy Mindy?
So many layers, so many stories. When you said you wanted to talk about my story, I'm like, which one? I have a lot. And so we might not get to everything, but mine was, by no means did I set out to be a practitioner or a guide or any of the things that I am labeled at this moment in time. I set out to be a ruthless business person, a masculine in nature, very aggressive, logical, emotionally absent. I don't even know what you'd say about my emotions. Discarded, invalidated. I set out to be a little Terminator, and I was following the rules of my upbringing, and I was very good at it. And so it was basically out of running into a wall full blast that there was no other option but to go a different way. So it wasn't like I was divinely like, oh, I'm going to use this discipline and motivation because someone has given me a path. There was no path. It was just a brick wall. And I went straight into it several times on many occasions. And so the way that I work now is say, hey, I see where this could lead you. Here's a different way because it's going to hurt really bad when you smack that wall. So the first things that fell were the physical body. They ran into the wall very fast. And I think that stemmed from an imbalance in my purpose and what I was living. And
Could you explain that a little bit? Like what were you experiencing? What was that imbalance that um you witnessed?
um, and I wouldn't have been able to identify at that moment in time because it's all I knew. And I think a lot of women get stuck here. They get stuck in different pathways. But this is all I know. It's painful, but I guess life is painful. People say it's painful. Not everybody looks like they're happy and they're healthy. So I'm one of these people that if I just work harder and have more discipline, then I'll get through it. It's more of a survival tactic, which is what my nervous system was brought into. My nervous system was not made for the hats that I was wearing and the environment I was living in. It's kind of like putting a plant in the closet. It's not going to do very well. It might get glimpses of the light, but it's not going to flourish. So underlying, I knew that there was a sense of unsafety. So I stayed in a very sympathetic fight or flight dominated nervous system from the beginning. So that led to sickness, hospital visits, diagnoses, medications, more medications, medications for those medications. So because you heal physically in within a system of systems, you will start to get diseased within the system altogether. Like you heal as a system and you fail as a system. I don't like to use the word fail, but that's pretty much what happened. The systems that keep you going to the bathroom, sleeping, thinking straight, the ability to relax, the ability to have children, the ability to have normal cycles, all of that was baseline starting to fail. But the allopathic model had a pill for everything and a reason for everything, or at least a name. So I couldn't go to the bathroom. They called it colonic inertia. Let's take some pills and let's eventually run out of options. So let's take out half my colon. I didn't do that. I have thankfully all of my organs. And the other options were you don't feel good, you don't have energy. Okay, well, take an antidepressant because you should be grateful and you should be happy. So this pill will make you happy. And that led me down the road of sleep studies and a lot of situations that made me question my sanity. Because if they don't have a name for it, then it's in your head and you make it up. And then self-doubt and handing myself over to the system. And eventually that didn't work very well. I found myself gravitating to small joys that make me happy. Moving the body is a great way for the nervous system to release things, even if you're unconscious in what you're doing. I had no idea, but I felt like movement felt good. I felt better instead of worse. So I did that, dove head first into the physicality of it. And then that only band-aids for so long. And I found myself in a stall with a rescue thoroughbred, drinking myself into numbness and not really wanting to be around anymore. My discipline failed. I thought I was a weak person. But come to find out that discipline serves me now every single day. But that was the physicality of it. Right up against the wall, as hard as possible, as fast as possible.
Yeah. And the fascinating thing too is like when you're going through all of these learnings, right? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to make things work, but you don't feel like anything's working. There's this disconnect. So you start to question, as you were saying, your sanity behind the system. You start to question, like, is this as good as it gets? And I'm curious at that point, Because I imagine too, there were little breaking points that were happening throughout it. But then what was that breaking point for you that made you realize that there is, um, there's got to be more to what you're experiencing?
Well, after that, that was the first part where I realized, okay, I'm going to be done with this, start over, new life, or I'm going to do something different. But the do something different wasn't about me. I had washed my hands of the options and the uh, counting the macros or the calories or fasting or taking this pill or that pill. I had given up on all of that. I just simply, it's not a fantastic realization, but I realized that this horse in front of me was not going to get cared for if I was to exit this life because
Wow.
he was a um, dragon. We will say he did not want anybody else around me, and he would remove them. So there was no one that was good enough to be able to feed this horse. So I made a commitment. I would stay around and feed him. And because of that, I think it gave me a purpose outside of myself. And that I was like, okay, I can pour my discipline into this. And that sparked and changed something because I wasn't going to leave and it wasn't just about me. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do more of the things that give me the energy to take care of this other being. And I realized in that moment that this was not an optimal place. The environment was not, and I was terrified to leave, terrified because of many conditioning, threats. You don't leave. This is your obligation. This is what you were made for. You will disappoint people, all the different things. And I had to either choose me, which would be the horse. I know it sounds strange, but me, I had to choose me because of this other person. And I use that on women all the time, for their kids or for their spouse or for their whatever. So sometimes when you're tapped out, you find something else. So I was like, all right, I'm going to change. I'm going to do better. I'm going to find some energy somehow. And there was relationship chaos um all around me. Parental relationships as far as romantic. And again, I had to choose what I felt was the best path at the time. And again, intuition will speak to you and your mind will speak to you and you will learn which one is the wiser of the two eventually. And I eventually got out of that atmosphere, that environment, and moved and got out of banking. I was a loan officer, sold my gym. I had a gym as well, and moved my horses and my boyfriend at the time. And we went off into a new environment. And that environment led me to realizations that I was alone and it felt fantastic. It's the first time in my life I could hear me and I could feel me because I was surrounded by Labradors and a rabbit and a bird and horses and Lynn State Park, like, and probably a rattlesnake in the wall. Pretty sure about that. But no furniture, no TV, no, very limited contact, no neighbors. And that is where I found me. And it was super cool. I felt safe for the first time. And it wasn't about my relationship. It was about, oh my gosh, I am a safe. This feels safe for the first time. And then you can taste it. Once you taste it, then you know what to compare it to. Right after that, I received news that I was perimenopausal and I was infertile. That was at 26. And right after that was 27 when I finally got the diagnosis that I was infertile. And back into cuckoo world I go, straight into you're broken. You're not good for anything. Your body's weak. A lot of emotions. I had just gotten married as well. So it was a shocker. And I dove headfirst into, I guess, service, something outside of myself that I was equipped for because of all these things I had accumulated. I was very physical. My discipline was off the chart. My pain tolerance was off the chart. And I could disassociate very well. All things I've had to unlearn or learn a balance. And you've helped me with that over the years. Like, that's interesting. And so did some work overseas, experienced what it was like to be unsafe, completely unsafe, not like in like America's unsafe.
Talk to me. What does
Okay,
that mean?
we'll go into it. Okay. So when the doctor said I couldn't have a baby, I heard I couldn't get pregnant. It was all new to me. I was still a child. And so I said, okay, well, I'm not having a baby. And then I got pregnant. And I was like, huh, they're wrong. I'm not broken. I am going to fit. I'm, of course, trying all these new things, feeling all these new things, must have healed me. Well, we lost the baby, as the doctors told us we would, late into the pregnancy. And that was a heartbreak for both of us. And I tended to do the things that I knew how to do. I compartmentalized. I used my discipline. I used logic. Well, I'm designed a certain way. I'm not designed to have children. So I'm going to go help people in the ways that I can because, again, naive. I believe that everyone would be helping people if they had the physicality and the time and they didn't have children. I didn't have these responsibilities and I could do it. So we found I found my way into an EMT clinic because I wanted to get into Sudan. And that was an active war zone, as it always is. And they did not, Red Cross did not bring people, period. And then beyond that, you couldn't get into the area without a medical license. So I was very stubborn. So I went to California and researched the quickest way to get a medical license. And that was, I think it was an EMT boot camp. It was hell on the planet. It was classroom all day long, chug some coffee and donuts, and then get on an ambulance and ride in LA, which is known. It was a different environment that I was used to. A lot of crazy stuff, a lot of experiences that tweaked my nervous system. And I got my license. I got extra training in stitching people up. And I said, I've got my license. We're out. My husband at the time, I'm pretty sure he was against all of it, but he was a kind person and didn't want me to die. So we went in and we arrived, and I worked as a doctorate for several weeks. We experienced the doctor at the time, which I was supposed to assist. It was one of the entire community was one click outside of tribal, the Maasai tribe. And so they were trying to function in more of a religious fashion, more Western fashion, but they still had their roots. So you did not, a female was not a doctor, and you did not look at people in the eyes, and you did not speak out of turn. And that was, the doctor left as soon as he found out I was a female and Michael wasn't the doctor. Michael was my ex. And we worked there, and it was beautiful and interesting, until it wasn't. I gave lectures there, just like I give lectures here. And the women met after work, after we had done our work. And I went over one time with the lecture. And it wasn't a long over, maybe 12, 15 minutes. Well, the woman was pregnant, took her a long time to get home. And so she was beaten and punished. And so she arrived at my window, losing the baby. I was not equipped for this. I was not trained for that. I knew that she had to get to a hospital, which was not around us. So I woke up the family and spoke out of turn. And I'm not sure what happened to the woman. I wasn't told, but my choices were I was going to get caned, to get punished, or I could immediately leave. We chose to immediately leave. And that was something that, until you're in that situation, you're not really sure how you would behave because your physical safety is being threatened and there is no law that is going to protect you. In America, sometimes we have this false sense of security that, oh, well, this person won't hit me because they'll go to jail. So that was interesting. We ended up traveling, and I ended up starting to vomit. And the person said, you have to take this malaria pill. Or you are going to find yourself very sick, and we're not going to be able to finish the mission, or whatever we would call it. I intuitively knew that was the strongest intuitive burst I've ever gotten in my life. The message was, you cannot take this pill. You will not take this pill. And we had just diagnosed, there was only three Wazungus, three white people in the village. I just diagnosed my partner, my assistant, with malaria. So there was a high chance that I had malaria. I refused to take the pill. Ex-husband was not happy. The guide was not happy. Again, we're traveling back and we're living in tents and I'm yakking everywhere and there's monkeys everywhere. It's fantastic. My ex-husband was running around in his underwear trying to chase the monkeys away. And I was refusing to take the pill. We got to the mission house. I said, I might be pregnant. And Michael said, you unfortunately cannot be pregnant. You're just crazy. You're not pregnant. I don't even remember anything that would cause us to be pregnant. I didn't either, but I knew that I couldn't take the pill. One way or the other, I wasn't going to take it. So I sent him into the village, came back with a pregnancy test. There was a fake line. It's not like it is now. It was just a cup, no seal. And it was a fake line. It was questionable. I sent him back into the village to get another one, came back, fake line. And I remember being a little bit delusional and talking to this woman and saying, what does this mean? Of course I know what it means. And she was like, you're pregnant. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm not going back to America because I'm going to lose the baby. So I'm going to stay here. Again, ex-husband, probably hair fell out at that point. And then I said, well, compromise. I'm not going into Sudan. I'm not going to be flown into Sudan into active war zone, but we'll go somewhere else. We went to Lakoni, which is the slum of Mombasa. Poor choice, probably, but a learning lesson. There was active voodoo. The two guards that had just been protecting the mission house had just been murdered for their organs. The mission house lady was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and we went and worked at an AIDS orphanage, but we would travel back. We did have knives and weapons on us, but we could not travel after dark. A whole different environment than the sweet little village. But that ended up, I did not take the malaria pill. And that was Riker. That was my first. And the whole time I learned gratitude, like intense gratitude. People are like, how are you so excited about the sun coming up? How are you excited about air conditioning? Well, because of that. I had every single day that I had that child with me. And you definitely feel that when you're pregnant, you know the being. And I expected him to leave at any moment. And I still get emotional about it. Because every day I was so grateful that he was there. I didn't care if I was yakking, not yakking, whatever. And it was an intense gratitude versus oh, I don't feel good, or oh, it's hot, or I'm itchy, or whatever. And we got back into the country and we got some medical assistance because I fell ill towards the end. But that was a lot of lessons in that. And Riker pretty much jump-started my own hormone production. I don't know what in that environment or what emotions allowed me to keep that baby, or maybe it was the first child that jump-started the hormones to give the other one a chance. Not sure. Nobody can give me any kind of wisdom on that. But that was Riker. And then very quickly after that was Slade. And then I have another one 10 years later.
I just want to recap and emphasize the what would seem like a phenomena in this story. You were diagnosed by multiple doctors, and in these diagnoses you were told that you were infertile, that you were perimenopausal, that you were and this is in addition to a ton of other diagnoses that you were basically claimed to be very, very ill. And you go and you explore a new environment that maybe to the average mind is very unsafe, but you experience something that could be to many people mystical. And I find that this is a very interesting point of conversation, especially as we talk about infertility rates constantly on the incline or year over year. And that is, just to segue, that is how you started really going into hormonal health and teaching people about the importance of hormones because of this circumstance, and and that you have impacted hundreds of women. You've helped people reverse the big C word, and that is something that doesn't get talked about enough. And, knock on wood, more people are waking up to these experiences and saying that, my baseline of unhappiness, or my baseline of feeling uncomfortable in my body, is not good enough anymore. Like, I want to feel good. And I think that there's a big nod to social media, but I want to talk, like, your story, because you experienced something that was so, at the time, you didn't have access to all of these things that are like, that even as of 2 years ago are more accessible. Like, you experience this for yourself, and we're like, oh my God, more people need to understand this. And for years, between the Riker and your youngest, Logan, you have taught a lot of women about hormones and the physical. My takeaway, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my takeaway is that a lot of people tend to come to you first because they know something's wrong, but it's the physical that they want the most change in initially.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. That experience made it where it wasn't just talk anymore. You hear people and they're like, "Oh, well, you have this diagnosis and you have to manage it. There's nothing you can do." I am telling nothing fires my ass up more than someone telling me that there's nothing that someone can do about it. I am relentless when it comes to allowing people to believe in a different potential. Um, and I'm not saying that, well, I am saying anything's possible, but to the potential that the person wants to believe in it. I got shown that time, as well as all my other diagnoses, that it was a suggestion. The fact that I needed to be on meds for almost every condition forever, no questions asked. That I needed to have my colon removed, that I needed sleep in meds, that I needed a constant, I don't know, check-ins to make sure that I wasn't going to hurt myself, that I wasn't going to hurt other people, that I was not able to have children. Like, I don't ever take anything as an ultimatum. And because I believe that, so like in my being, I know it. It's not like even there's a different potential. I know that people can heal and feel better, whatever better feels like to them. But the diagnosis is a doctor's opinions. That is, and if you have 20 or 30 doctors agreeing, that's still not truth. N equals one. You are different, and your body has endless potential. You are always endless potential. I tell people, what are you? Your endless potential. So whether you have a diagnosis, of Crohn's or infertility or the C word or any autoimmune condition, or just that you've always been overweight your whole life, all of that is just suggestions. You can do something different. And so women tend to, I always get no offense, but I always get the dumpster fires. I always tell them, like, baby, you are a dumpster fire and I love you. And we're going to put it out if you want to. After they've been through the allopathic system and kind of like me, gotten to the end of their rope, and they're like, hey, I don't know what else to do, but I heard through the grapevine that you might can help. And their hopium is very low, very low. And they're a little bit snarky and probably a little bit condescending because they have been told and they've experienced over and over and over just heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. And they are not interested in having another heartbreak. They don't want another relationship that's going to end with them being undisciplined or unmotivated and it's all their fault and they're broken. So I go ahead and tell them that's not how it is. You just had bad information. So I get them to understand how the human body works on a base level. And then we move up the totem pole, which is how I pretty much triage every client that I've ever gotten. But I get them because they know that something's off and the doctors can't find it. And so we find it pretty fast.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm thinking of the totem pole, and just, like, from the bottom, it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's nutrition, right? It's the physical health, movement. And then at the top, there's heart, right? There's the heart coherence. And something that um stands out to me time and time again is that if we flipped it and we started with heart coherence,
Oh,
a lot of the other things would kind of naturally fall into place. They're much easier, but we are complex individuals because we choose to be complex individuals because of our mind. And so therefore we start with the physical and we are an onion and we just peel back the layers until we get to this center, this core being of heart coherence. Tying it back a little bit to something that you shared before when you said, there's something greater than me when I connected to this thoroughbred horse. That's when you realize that there was something bigger than you out there. Like there was a connection there. And heart coherence um indicates that we are connected and we are on this planet because there's something bigger than us. And the bigness is something that we feel in our soul, in our essence. And when we are in this place, there's just this grandness and the spaciousness that comes in, and we're able to get into more of a flow state, which feels really freaking powerful. And in your story, it, what I was hearing is that there are all these moments that you were able to grasp that allowed you to feel this. And like humans, we grow and evolve. And what I've noticed too, is in my time knowing you, is that there has been massive growth and evolution that you've experienced. And that leads me to the biggest opportunities that most women tend to utilize in at the very end, and that's the highest part of the totem pole, the heart coherence. Connecting to that first is the biggest brain that we have. A lot of people tend to use the logical mind, but the logical mind tends to keep us safe and in our stories that we know. But I want to talk about your experience moving from the logical mind of experiencing and witnessing in your circumstances, healing the physical body, but then recognizing that the logic didn't necessarily make the most sense for you because of other things that you were experiencing. So you had Slade after Riker, and then there was a beautiful gap of growth and opportunity that presented itself. Let's talk about that before you had Logan, your youngest.
and this was a part where you learn things and then you apply them. You know things and then you apply them. And I tend to tell people I did things in reverse, just like the totem pole. Absolutely. I started with movement. Then I learned about nutrition and I got certifications, all kinds of certifications everywhere, on my wall or wherever they're at. And they don't mean a whole lot at that moment in time. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade is what I kind of look at it as. And I learned the lessons I had to break to learn how to fix that part, heal my digestion, heal my sleep, all the way up the totem pole, because we have movement and then we have nutrition and then we have hormones. So I moved up as I failed. I always joke around. I'm like, well, people ask what kind of clients I'm going to get. Well, what kind of gift am I going to get next? What kind of pain teacher am I going to get next? Then I'm going to become I guess, an expert in that because I go through it. And then I get to teach from my perspective, which is kind of powerful. So then you move up and then there's sleep, breathing, and hydration. And then there's thoughts. And while I was in this state of being gifted these two children, of course, there was immense gratitude and there was immense desire to help women, and men, but most of the people were women because that was what I was surrounded by. One woman after the other would come and they would say, I'm sick with this, or my child was sick with this. And with Riker, um, with him, he had severe, and again, this is just back into the physicality of it in the nutrition. He had failure to thrive. I did all the breast milk. I did everything organic. I was at the state of completing the Check Institute and knowing that organic and had a nutrient density and the thoughts and where every single thing had to be perfect. And everything was perfect when I had this child that had a distended stomach, it had Venous pooling, he had projectile vomit, he was diagnosed with asthma, he was a very sick little one, and he had breathing treatments, a little steroid bear every single day to be able to continue to breathe. He was very limited and picky about what he ate, and I again went to the allopathic doctors because I don't know about this. I just want to take care of my son. And they said, well, he's just going to have to be on allergy medicine and steroids the rest of his life. And I was like, oh, well, that's not an option for me. So I went and got a bunch of allergy testing, food sensitivity testing, and they said, there's nothing. He's fine. He's great. And I'm like, well, no, he's not. He can literally clear 2 people with his vomit. And we got into a situation where we were in the emergency room because the steroid bear was at somebody else's house over the holidays, one set of parents. And we ended up in the ER, and they almost couldn't intubate him. So my little child was turning blue in my arms. Again. And so I said, F you to the system again, and I did it myself. I took all the inflammatory foods out of the house, and within 2 weeks, asthma was gone. There was no more venous pooling, no more vomiting, and my big Riker, that's the least of his concerns. I had to remove gluten from his diet, and it sounds very elementary at this moment in time because everybody knows about gluten. And back then, that was 17 years ago, I was making my own almond milk out of almonds. And so once we learned that, I took the reins fully from most of the other areas of health as far as practitioners. I started connecting more with the doctors and OBGYNs and pediatricians and friends that I had, and started networking. And I started accumulating more and more knowledge, and my practice started to grow. And more waiting lists. There were so many people that had bad information. We would try things differently. And I found where I started to see a pattern in my women, and I was brave enough to try different approaches versus what the current guidelines are. So I started to get a little bit roguey and had stances on different things. We had a massive success. I started building, I guess, my intellect started to grow, and I started to say, okay, everything is logical. I need more information and I will be safer. So information kept me safe. Information kept my children safe. And I was just, like I said, I had an insatiable desire to learn more stuff because then I could keep more people safe. It all comes down to safety. And there was a few things that didn't line up logically. Me and my ex, although we were very good friends, we've always been very good friends, he was logical. He was a partner. He was a friend. He was a buddy. And there was no passion. There was no arguments. And from outside looking in, we were a perfect couple. We actually did marriage counseling to other people. And people looked to us for advice. And I felt like I was an imposter. Because yes, on the surface level, we didn't fight. We had a great time. We went to parties. And underlying that, I have a very strong desire to feel passionate and connected and feel safe and feel feminine in nature, feminine energy. Because up to that point, I was the leader. I was the rational one, the logical one, the one that made the plans, the one that protected everybody from everything. And I got gifted an autoimmune condition after my second son because I couldn't put down the leadership role. And I was so terrified of not doing more and more and more and more. So that was the first illogical part that I felt. And I felt it very, very strongly. And I didn't realize how much I was desperately desiring a romantic sacred union, we will say. And I was putting that out there and here shutting it down. And we ended up getting a divorce. And it was, I tell people, we went to the divorce attorney together, and then we went to Whole Foods after. It wasn't that traumatic in the ways that it could be. And again, I wanted to do that differently. I did not want to have an ex-husband that I hated, and my whole life revolved around talking bad about him and making sure that the children suffer because we can't get along. I was like, that's dumb. We've made the decision. We're going to be friends, and we are. We still are. He's probably here somewhere. And I got another lesson after that. Very quickly after that. In that you don't want to only use your mind and logic when it comes to matters of the heart and things that should be intuitive. I got, after that was the hierarchy got established between my head and my heart. And I find that women, the more intellectual they are, the greater the danger that they fall into this trap where they value and they put their head above their heart. And it's very painful lessons. And I don't wish them on anyone. But when you know here, this, I can't speak for everyone, but this should be the leading factor. And now this leads in all my decisions. It doesn't matter. I don't need to validate it. I don't need to discuss it. It's just me and me. And I find when I speak to women, many times I can literally feel the argument between the head and the heart. They will start off with, I just don't feel good. I know something's off. I'm stressed. I shouldn't be stressed. I have nothing to be stressed about. Everything in my life is good. I don't have it as bad as some people. And it's not that dramatic, but that's what it feels like to me. It feels like two different opposing forces talking each other into nothing, into letting it go and guilt and shame. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. If you don't feel good, you don't feel good. And just because you've never felt good before does not mean that you don't have the potential to. Me at my age now feels so much better. Since I've known you, I felt so much better than I did when I was in the 20s. People were always like, hey, wouldn't you love to go back to 25? Hell no. I love it. I'm in 46 now, and all my systems work pretty well. Doesn't mean that there's not lessons in heartbreak.
So your women that you coach and you guide, you feel the difference between the head and the heart. And I would imagine that's because you've also been feeling the difference between what head and heart talk looks like. And you are someone who loves information. It's by your design. And I'm talking about even like human design. Like you genuinely need that information. And rightfully so. And in order for you to feel comfortable in that space, you have to have studied something so much to the point where you feel expert enough in it in order to be confident to share your stance on what you're experiencing and what you're willing to guide on. Going back, let's talk about your last relationship, because I think that this was one of the biggest lessons for you in moving through a lot of, I'm going to call it what has come to mind, like your karmic lessons. And I say that, and I know that that's a divisive term, but having been friends with you for a very long time at this point, and knowing your story from when you were a child to where you are now, there were a lot of chains that needed to be set free. And in order for that to happen, most of the time, I'm not saying all the time, I think a lot of people need to go through their shadows and face it like phoenixes rising from the ashes. And sure, there's the stories that you mentioned just now, but this one to me feels very powerful when you talk about it. And I'm grateful that you're willing to talk about it. I know it can feel like a lot. And this is for a lot of women, it can be a trigger warning. We're talking about abusive situations. And so if this is something women who are not ready to hear that, I would suggest turning this off at this point. But I would like for you to share your your story about your last relationship that you experienced and you had to move through, if you're willing.
Oh, absolutely. And this will be the first time apart from just very close friends and therapy, lots of therapy that I speak on it. So I might get a little bit muddled, but, um, no one really understands or you don't set out to, experience these kind of things. When it's like a karmic lesson, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know. And I had gotten to this, I guess, comfort zone where I thought I could heal everything in my body. And I was, safe. And that was an illusion that needed to be broken. Because it doesn't just stop with the physicality and the healing of the body. Now, if that's where you are, then that's where you are. But there's more. There's more healing that can happen. And I called in via my desperate urges to have depth. I wanted to have someone that can understand me. And I know that that's just the best words for women. Understand me, see me, love me, and protect me because you know who I am. And that's a key point in this because people think of love and is like ownership. It's like caretaking. I always say it's like having a car and having a male with his car. He's just going to buff that thing with a diaper. He's going to take care of it. He's going to know what kind of oil to put in and what kind of tires to put in and everything. Like, yeah, I don't know about cars, but everything that you could possibly know, he's going to know because he wants to take care of that car as good as possible. So I thought, I'm a very complex, weird little creature. It's going to take a very special man to be able to know me. Now, it's different because my girlfriends did. They knew me. They invested time and they asked questions, and they come to find out would be one of the major reasons I made it through that relationship. But I was like, I'm going to listen with my ears, not my heart, to words. Very sweet, charming, amazing Irish words. I was in Georgia and I met someone that was from the same school, we will say, or he knew people in the school. There's a lot of deceit, so we're not really sure about what is actuality, but I met someone that was a practitioner, a coach as well. Not in the hormonal world, but in the physical world. And so we could talk. We could talk about helping people. We could talk about passion. We could talk about purpose. We could talk about etherical matters that just makes your heart melt. And he had an opinion and I had an opinion. It was wonderful. And there was hours and hours and hours and hours of conversation on the phone every single day. And that now I know is called love bombing. I didn't know these words because, again, I worked in the hormonal lab physicality world, not the emotional world. And so started becoming more intense with this man, and he wanted me to go over and meet some of his friends in London and not really where he lived, but somewhere else. And he came over here, visited. So the relationship seemed absolutely amazing. Snowed over all of my friends. Very charming. I say that because that is with some people, charm needs to be watched. He said all the right things. That's another red flag. But I was so starved and desperate for this kind of interaction and intimacy and passion. And we never even got physical. It was just the words. Fell in love with the intellect. Fell in love with the potential. And there were red flags. There were lots of red flags. But when you're so hungry, after you've been breadcrumb for so long, you're like, oh, it's okay. I can fix that. I can fix that. I can show that this is not healthy. And if there's an explanation for it, then I'll accept it because I'm a giving and I'm a very kind person and I forgive people because I've done bad things too. That was my stories. And so there was always a very good reason. And I said, okay, well, I'll be the bigger person and I'll understand. I'll let him know that I didn't like it, but he changed. Went to therapy. He had all of the reasons why he might have done something that was not that great. And it was a slow thing. It's what is the frog in the cooking pot? Like, of course, I would have jumped out if I knew what was underneath the mask, but the frog stays in there because it's just one thing after another, and it's slow, 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 slow burn, and then, oh, we're cooked. So that's how it was in the beginning, discounting my own intuition over and over and over and over because there were words, there's language, and there was emotions and tears and passion. And very quickly, as it is with unhealthy relationships, you move too fast. There was an intense pressure to move in with me, and very hyperfixated on my children. I couldn't slate at the time, and I was like, "Oh, this is moving too fast," but I want to come and take care of you. I want to live with you. I want to do all these things. Bam, moves, sells all of his stuff like over a weekend, moves in, and I'm like, "Oh, that was fast. Okay." And then right after that was very intensive. I want to make a baby with you. Now, I was very, very happy with my two children. They were not easy births. And I was like, hey, dude, like they were, I'm good. We're out of diapers. I'm saying that my practice is going well. I think that you should be with somebody else if you want a baby. I love you, but that's just a hard no. And that was steamrolled over. Tracked my cycles. I just want to make a baby with you. I've never felt like this about anybody else. All my friends think it's amazing. It's going to be wonderful. Imagine us being pregnant. La, 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 la. I mean, controlled what I ate and everything. And at the time, I thought it was very loving and I was very scared, but I agreed because, okay, how romantic is this? And then I got a lesson that it took a lot of therapy and a lot of healers and shamans to help me understand. And I'm still trying to understand it. And eventually you let go of trying to understand and you just accept it. But ended up, took a pregnancy test, walked down the stairs. And this is a very loving, passionate, amazing man up until that moment in time. Showed him the pregnancy test in the kitchen. He looked up from his computer, looked back down at his computer. I started to cry because in that moment in time, I knew I had played hell. My heart was like, okay, here we go. And the mind was like, what? And I started bawling and I said, we need to talk. And he said, we have nothing to talk about. And from that moment, every single day of that pregnancy was hell. It was a deep, broken, lonely, there's no words to describe it, but I know women have gone through this. Discard, a massive discard. You go from every single thing about you is wonderful and I desire the end to make a baby would be, of course, for me, the greatest gift to give someone based off my history, to the bottom of the barrel scum. Within a moment, the mask falls off. My girlfriend stepped in at that moment in time and they supported me through the entire pregnancy. There were times where I thought I could explain myself and I could explain how I was feeling, and that was met with punishment, isolation, stonewalling, many of the things that I have now learned through psychology. Now I can help other women with, but Darvo, a lot of contempt and basic abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, all of the things. So I went through that pregnancy almost losing myself, to the point of I, there were, my girlfriends were like, I don't know who you are anymore. I was terrified because parts of me knew the biology of carrying a child and the dangers of high cortisol. And then the other part of me needed to grieve. It needed to release these emotions. So I was caught in between the world of thank God for my girlfriends. I could have that safety and that lower cortisol. And then I'd go home to a monster. My children were not safe. My ex-husband stepped in. At one point, the ex had abandoned us and went back to Ireland because the house found out they had mold in it. So I'm pregnant with a mask on, cleaning mold, throwing away baby books and things like that. And I was not safe to live at that house. He left because he couldn't handle the headache that might occur if he has mold exposure. And so I went and graciously, my ex-husband let me sleep on his couch and stay at his house. whilst pregnant with some other man's child. And I learned some humility. I learned many, many things. I learned what was safe and not safe. But again, I wasn't finished with the lesson. He left. And then a lot of red flags came out. A lot of relationships, following other people, just deceit, a lot of layers and layers and layers of deceit. And he went to Ireland and he said he had therapy and that he was discussing everything and he never meant to hurt me. And now he's back into the love bombing. There's always a cycle that they follow. There's a intense love bombing, and then there's a discard, devaluation, and then you return back to love bombing again. So it's kind of like a whiplash emotionally, and you desperately want the child's father to not be a crazy person because you have a child. It's like this instinctual thing. You will take a breadcrumb and you will hope, and you will pour more hopium on it. And so he invited me over to Ireland. I met the therapist. It was very strange, and his family. And he convinced me that he had changed. He was not going to be a monster anymore. And we flew back together, and it was an amazing flight. And within the next week, the mask fell off again, and he was back to being a monster. The sexual aspect of it was very, very damaging. I learned different ways that my nervous system could react. Freeze was one of them. So I froze many of the times. And that damage that you do, it takes a while to undo. And you don't really know how bad the damage is because you're just trying to survive it. But I encourage people, if you've gone through a bad abusive relationship, you must go through. You have been laying with someone with fleas and you now have them, and it will affect. And most women I hear is, it's not as bad as my last relationship. And I don't even want to go back there and think about it. Well, you need to, because you're still playing out those in your everyday life unconsciously in many ways with the not processing of abuse or trauma. And I've realized that further on, but he would get to the point where he had no regard for my body, and my emotions did not have a safe place to be expressed. So I would just act, and my girlfriends would just act, and everybody would just act like the abuse was not happening. Most people didn't know, besides just my close family and my OBGYN, of course. He had a strong opinion about my ex. But I also had this naive hope, again, because of the romantic movies, that he will see his child and then he will change because he just needs to love something. I wasn't good enough. The child will be. So we just make it until the child is born. I learned that lesson was a false story as well. The hospital was a very unsafe place to be left with him. And he took me out of the hospital early, which led to complications with names and all kinds of other things because we weren't married. I got punished for that as well. But we came home. I was a C-section, so I had a walker. I was not supposed to move around very much. And I think it was, probably about 15 minutes after being home. My mother was there. She put me down some salmon to eat. I was so hungry. I had the baby. Everything was good. We were safe. A little bit of pain, whatever. And then I said something to bother him. I caused what they would call it a narcissistic abuse injury. And I don't like to use the word narcissist. He's a messed up person. We don't have to have a diagnosis for it. He did not have the ability to reflect or have empathy or compassion. There was some screws loose upstairs. He had traumatic childhood. And I said something to upset him. And he started getting very loud, screaming. And then he walked over and snatched the baby from me. Of course, you go right into fight or flight then. Fight or flight, fawn, or any of the other nervous system activate. You will move. Even if your stomach is cut open, you will move. So I remember falling over the couch, trying to people please and trying to get him to calm down because he has an fresh infant in his arms, and he is screaming like a crazy person. My mother runs upstairs, locks herself in the bedroom. He starts to go upstairs with my child. Significant flight of stairs. I follow him. I ripped myself back open. I didn't know that at the time. I get in there and he's screaming and rocking back and forth like a crazy person with the infant, and the head is flopping back and forth. And I am so ass kissing. I don't know what kind of, if you've ever had like a hostage situation, you'll do whatever you have to do. So from that moment in time, I convinced him to let me nurse the baby. I have to nurse the baby. And I stayed up and I held the baby pretty much every night. And I kissed his ass and I made him feel like he was the king. My girlfriends, we wiped our phones. We made it clear that I would take my walker down to the lake so we could talk because I was scared to talk anywhere in the house. And they would bring food. And one of my girlfriends even posed as a lactation consultant because I was having problems having the milk because I was so stressed out. So from then on, it was try to get away from him and very, very scared. And we eventually, and I almost used the word escape. It sounds dramatic, but I got free of him. And I moved away and started over financially and tried to put the pieces back together. But there were so many times that my brain logically overrode my heart. And that was a lesson, of course, I had to learn. Logan is my little angel and amazing. And, you can never say, I wish I would have not met him because I met him, because I learned so much about psychology and so much about my wounds that I didn't even know I had based off of childhood, which is a whole nother show. But there were so much goodies in that. So much breaking so you can learn the lesson on a visceral level that when I talk to a woman, she doesn't have to explain herself. She does not have to validate herself. And that's something really nice for a woman to feel because most of the time women have had to validate and people have made it almost their fault. And so many people overuse the word abuse and rape and narcissist to where it's like crying wolf. And then the women that are actually needing the help are terrified to say anything. And I tell people, if you've ever been through abuse, you are actually fearful. You are scared of someone. So you don't fight with them. You don't poke the bear if you're terrified of them until you're not terrified of them. And it was another aspect I was so physical that no one would pick me as a roll over and take it kind of person. They didn't understand if it was so bad. You have martial arts trained. I've been martial arts trained for many, many years. Why didn't you do something? Well, when you are that scared, your nervous system takes over and you do what you have to do for the baby because you are terrified.
How many years were you in this cycle for, would you say, with him?
Not very long because it was so very fast. Meaning whether until met him until I got away from him, but he is still, since I have a child with him, I still get lessons every other week end because he's still in my life. But after the child, there was a lot of abandonment, reentry, fear. The cycle continued, but Logan is about to be 8 this Sunday. And so I've been in the cycle with him pretty much, we say a year before having the baby or a year and a half because some of it was just Pollyanna stuff. But I'd say a good 9 years probably of being with him.
So being with him, like in terms of learning and growing and experiencing things, you were gifted a ton of big lessons after giving birth to Logan. And it took years of seeing different stages of him and light and different angles of him for you to hit a certain point in your life where you said no more. And it doesn't mean that you're not in conversation with him or contact with him because of your son, but what did that look like to you? What did these patterns show up as? I from our conversations they were completely different, but what did they show up as as you grew in your dynamic with him and evolved in your dynamic with him? And what was that last chapter like for you where you said, I can't do this anymore? So twofold.
Yes. And this is the one that's a little bit more confusing because up to that point, we've heard the stories about narcissistic abuse, abusive pregnancies, getting away from them. But you just physically get away from them in the beginning. You still are damaged. And I don't want to say that in a negative way, but you still have fleas. Your actions, and there was a specific time when I was done, and you were there for that, but I added to my prayer every morning. I have my specific prayer that fear no longer controls you. And it is so hard. It is like scraping bubblegum off the bottom of your shoe, trying to get the awareness to know that no, this is not a logical best case scenario. This is a fear response. This is a what if, and that constantly wraps around your being. So there was, again, stories where I had to pay for what I had done. I have to do what I have to do for the good of my son. Self-sacrifice. And it's almost poetic because in the beginning, what saved me and kept me on the earth was me caring about something outside of myself. And then to save myself again, many, many years later, I had to care more about myself than everything outside of myself. And that was a very hard ass lesson. So you want to believe things. You want the best case scenario. You want, of course, with me, I believe everybody can heal from anything. Again, that is a story that is not always true. It is possible everybody can heal, but that doesn't mean they're going to. So when he left us, when I no longer gave him access, when you cut off access to whatever he's either physical touch or bank account or just having that control, I moved. I'm like, nope, we don't live here anymore. Bank account's cut off. Bank account being cut off pissed him off. So he had plans to be in Miami and I was going to live here in North Florida and we were going to drive and let him see the child. Oh, I forgot that part after after I had the baby, I was terrified and he, I wouldn't say convinced me. He forced me to get married to allow him to stay in the country. Little tidbit there. I forgot. That was cute. So we got married. And because I wanted to be a good person, I didn't want to kick him out of the country because then, he wouldn't be able to see his child. But he decided to leave. He decided to not even say goodbye to his child. He left my truck, which of course is all my stuff, at the airport and flew over back home because he desperately needed to be away from all of us. And so once you leave, you have a problem getting back in because you're dealing with the Irish embassy instead of the American embassy. If you get married, you're cool. You stay here. You leave, not so cool. So he got to play the victim, which was very, very important. He got to paint the picture that he was being kept from his son, that the political state at the time kept him from doing it, and it was horrible. Then COVID hit. And then he got detained longer, which I still am very happy about that. And the whole time, every single day, I FaceTimed him to make sure I was protected in court because I was in the hot seat if he could prove that I married him to keep him in the country and he wouldn't get any punishment because he's in Ireland. So I did what I needed to do. I shoved the phone in my son's face every single day for I don't know how long. And he left when my son was 6 months old. And he played the victim and he cried to everybody that he could cry to. And I was in therapy and the therapist would say, do not allow him back in the country. But I was caught because if I divorce him, he could bring suit. And so it was catch-22. And I was scared. I cannot go to jail. I have 3 children. So he slowly started to build rapport or I just checked off the list. And he came back into the country. I was terrified of him. My son didn't know him, obviously, and we started to develop a normal coexistence where I would stay there because I was scared that he would abuse my son. And I would make sure that if there was going to be any abuse, it would be on me, not on my son. But he never did anything too bad. He was not connected to the child, which I don't think he can be. And then he started to do more and more and more and more things. Love bomb, love bomb, love bomb, love bomb. It shifts very dramatically. And then he was driving down to see his son because he got into the country. See, it gets a little bit confusing because I'm still working through the details. And he started being kinder, and he started being kinder, and he started more than anything taking accountability, verbal accountability. And whilst he was gone, I had another relationship that had supported me. And so I was in that relationship, and something happened to where, okay, I'm in this relationship, I'm safe, I'm happy. Every other weekend, I've got to make space and protect my son. And then it started to shift and get muddled to where, okay, well, this relationship does not serve my family. This relationship only serves me. I need to sacrifice this relationship. And I need to give this man a second chance. And I think it was mainly because of the absolute depth of his accountability. Or I'm trying to figure it out still, but like he would call his mother and confess all the sins, even the sexual sins. And he would call his best friends and say, oh my gosh, I was such an asshole. I just wanted you to know that I was such an asshole and I was an abusive. I wouldn't even call it abuse until he called it abuse. He confessed in front of everybody. He just wanted everybody to know how bad he was, that I could forgive him and we could have a family. And he would switch and say things like, you're going to be my wife and you're going to be together and we're going to be together. And we're going to be a happy family. And I was like, oh, that sounds crazy. But then he would sandwich it in a bunch of good stuff. And I think you were there for a few times. He would overstep, boundary, overstep, overstep, overstep. And again, it was that fear and that freeze. I remember him overstepping boundaries and me freezing and me being like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I have to, like, it's not logical. But when you're so scared, you don't know what to do. You don't know what's best. And that's that self-sacrificing martyr crap that was still in me. And that fear of what if I rejected him? What is he going to do? How bad is he going to hurt me? But it's all illusionary. You can't really hurt someone, but to a certain point. And it's that illogical fear that controls you. And my nervous system was like, nope. It literally took over, or my heart took over, and it shut me down. There was a series of events, and I ended up in the hospital. We still don't know what happened. No one can give a diagnosis. There's some speculation, but off and on, that was the worst illness I've ever had. And the nervous system knows. You can't breathe. Your palms are sweaty. Your armpits are pouring. You can't catch your breath. You just feel like drained. You have no energy. And then the minute that they leave, oh my gosh, everything's wonderful until the next time. And I allowed this person to like come and live in the house again. And my nervous system was just shot. It could not handle it. It was screaming. This was not good. Now, from the outside looking in, everybody was like, all right, he's changed. That's amazing. I didn't think that those kind of people could change. And it was getting it was kind of an interesting phenomenon until it wasn't. And then I said, hey, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with you in a physical romantic way. Like I'll still be around and I'll still be, co-parent, but I can't do it. And it wasn't actually right then that his mask fell off again. It was when I returned to my older relationship. And he had to visually see someone, and then the illusion that they create just crumbles, and the fantasy and the overstepping boundary crumbles. I don't know if it completely crumbles. I don't know if they ever give up, but at that moment in time, he discarded everything. He discarded the older boys. He discarded his persona, his his niceness. He went straight back into the abusive situation. He said all the bad things, and he just cut everybody off and changed his appearance, which he had done. His appearance, his lifestyle, his Instagram, his every friends, they change and get a new, fresh storyline and narrative. But there's the nervous system knows, and you can only discard it for so long, and then you're going to start drinking, you're going to start taking pills, you're going to start doing extracurricular activities. There's only so long before you break, and some people are gifted it a little bit faster than others. And again, it's that logical side where I think that the more that you intellectualize and the more that um, you allow people to cast spells on you. And this one actually was when I learned that not only did I not always listen to the doctors, because the doctors were the physical realm. I wasn't going to listen to my intellect. And then I also got the lesson that I was not going to outsource my spiritual guidance as well. Because I had a guru. I hate to say the word guru, it sounds funny, but he was my teacher, my mentor, my spiritual guide for since preschool with Riker. So 17 years, minus one because I haven't been in contact with him as of late. But he gave me guidance that helped me. He told me every single thing that was going to happen with Pete, and I disregarded it. And I looked back with regret many, many times saying, wow, that could have saved me a lot of pain if I would have just listened to him. And every single time he was right. And he was the main source of getting me through the time where I was isolated after I moved, because that was a hot mess of hardness. And I appreciated him more. And I still do. I still appreciate him. And I don't have any animosity towards him. But he told me very specifically that I needed to keep that person in my life. And whether that ends up correct in 20 years, that was a false guidance that caused me to stay in longer and to not trust my own intuition. And I was terrified. Going against my God, that was horribly hard. I can go against doctors all day long, but my spiritual guide that is proven correct, I was like, okay, I'll let him in. I will break up with my other partner, and I will let this man in, and I will give him everything. I will try my best. And I did give my 100%, and I couldn't. My heart would not let me, and I had to go against every single human that I believed had my best interest at heart, and say, nope, you have to go, and let the cards fall. But I don't think I would have survived physically much. I would have had to get on some kind of medication to disassociate, and I still don't think that would have worked. When you know what you're here for and you don't live in your passion and in your purpose, some souls don't tolerate that very well. And I know mine does not tolerate it. Well, I'm here for a reason. I've always known it. There's no other thing I'm going to do. I'm not good at much else. And if I don't live authentically and aligned, there are harsh realities. And that wall, bam, hit it again.
And just to reflect for a second, like your research that you had done and all of the things that were making sense to the mind, like that had proven you correct up until this point. And logically, to what you were saying, like being in a partnership with him was going to look logically and to whatever like sociological standards that are out there, like the most optimal option. So you allowed this, and not just that, to like this spiritual counselor showed you the timelines that it would take to get there. And sure, there were going to be there was going to be a lot of discomfort, but if you allow this partnership to proceed, this would be the end game, right? This would be it. And um going through that, and being on the sidelines, I saw my friend basically shut it, like your system was completely shutting down. It was kind of scary how quickly it was going, and um it almost looked like you were dying to me. That's how bad it got. And um as your friend, I was like, there's something not right. Like, and so obviously the next best step is like, okay, let's get you all the things that you need in order to do that. But when push came to shove, the pattern was there was a lot of safety being neglected, because at the end of the day, if he touched you and you tensed up, or if he was talking to you and trying to give you terms of endearment, and it just wasn't hitting the way that your heart was craving that it was hitting, there was always going to be some sort of agitation on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, on a physical level. And what was once your sacred space no longer was that. And there's this place where it's like you could pick. It's like you were literally going to, what I thought, die because you couldn't tolerate it anymore, and you were allowing the optics of your mind to override death, or you were going to change because you knew that this was not your time, and you took that option. And there was nothing else at this point. Literally, I don't think there was anything else that you could have done. That's scary, because when your mind is always proving you right, and has proven you right up until this point, this is something completely different. You had to take a turn. And something that I think a lot of people are experiencing as of late, and what you have even brought up with a lot of your clients, is that we're at this point where it's been on a mass level. Like, we are fed with so much trauma on the news, on social media, on a nuclear family level, on a family level, on a neighborhood town level, right? Like, there is so much infiltrating our systems at this point, that taking care of ourselves on that physical level, on that mental level, it helps, right? It helps us digest things better. It helps us move better. It helps us detox better, right? Like, and that's important because we need to take care of the physical vessel. But I don't know anymore, like, if we can almost like allow what was once the last part of the totem pole to be the last part of the totem pole, because of so much that's happening at a constant rate.
Yeah, I absolutely. I don't think, and I've tried and changed my coaching to where no matter what is presented, polycystic ovary syndrome, whatever, I say, hey, let me tell you what the totem pole is, and let me tell you what is going to be necessary. I will clean up your hormones and balance your hormones, and you'll feel good for a certain amount of time, and then you won't, because you're not addressing the root. And the root cause is always thrown around, like root cause is a parasite infection. No, it's not. It's your nervous system dysregulation. It's old trauma. It's who and what has access to you. And we have got to quit prostituting ourselves out. Women in general, they have allowed far too much. And doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they can tolerate it. At that moment in time, eventually they won't be able to. And if you want to enjoy your life and have peace, you will limit access to whatever it is that bothers your nervous system. You will limit it just like you would limit a toxin. It is not going to help. It is going to dysregulate you, and it is going to make all of your systems perform less effectively. And we can have a trauma. We can have a stress. And if we have the ability to regulate our own nervous system, we handle the stress. It doesn't make the stress go away. The world is always going to be crazy. But what you allow into yourself, no one makes you take it in. No one makes you wrap the stories around it. and exasperate it. The peace comes from that knowledge and that discerning mind. And that's what I'm seeing more and more. The women have got to take way more drastic steps than just cutting out sugar or not drinking for 7 days. Like, that's great. And I love it, but that's old school. Like, we need to get more efficient.
What in terms of the patterns that you're seeing and in partnerships, I've also noticed a lot of when nervous system regulation comes into play, there's a lot about like these boundaries being set and quick blaming another in the dynamic. It doesn't mean that the blame isn't there's no objective truth to the dysregulation that's happening. If that makes sense. I'm not sure if it does, but basically my point being is that like in when we are in a dysregulated state, it's very easy to blame something that's outside of us, when in reality there's this separation because we are individuals, but there's also a connection there of there is a oneness, there's a harmony, and we are electric beings, and that system in as a unit as a whole is still impacting us as well, the individual. So that system isn't solely to blame necessarily, but how have you handled the concept of like it is your fault that I feel this way, it is your fault that I am this way? It doesn't mean, like, again, it doesn't mean that it's solely that person's fault, but I'm curious if, number one, that made sense, and number two, if if you've experienced that too with your clients.
Absolutely. I'll be able to tell where they're coming from really quickly, because the root of your dysfunction many times is other based. And that means you give your power away to the other. And so if the person in the relationship is growth minded, is there to understand, to co-regulate, then the objective is not to blame the other. It could be, yes, you did knock over the vase and now it is broken. That could be a truth, but to understand the why behind it is how you grow together and how you continue to co-regulate each other's nervous systems, because you grow in understanding. You can always be right. That doesn't keep your nervous system safe. It just invites more fight so you can be right. And I find that when you have a disagreement or an argument and you perceive it as a fight, as an attack, then your part of your brain that is in charge of logic, empathy, compassion, and big picture, it completely shuts down. So you have no access to that tool. So you might be a very intellectual, caring, loving person, but if you're letting your trauma spill over into your relationships, you are not going to come from that place. You're going to come from a primitive, let me defend myself, or from a female, let me make myself safe, which often comes as defending themselves. And so if it is always someone else, you will always invite that pattern so you can be right, and you will be right and you will be adrenally fatigued. You will be right and you will be alone. So it's not about separate and right and wrong. It is about understanding that we are all messy. We're all messy. And we all have wounds, and we try to help understand. Tell me why you are perceiving me as an attacker. Tell me why you froze. Tell me why. Not that was wrong and that was right. If I judged my behavior on wrong and right, I would have a life of guilt and shame that I would never allow myself to heal, because I'm not worthy of healing. But if I look at it, it's like, damn, I was doing the best I can and you're doing the best you can. Let's talk about it. It's a whole different vibration. And then you grow together and your nervous systems can help because you have the best intention. You know that person, like if me and you got into a fight, I would know you have the best intentions for me and I have the best intentions for you. So it's almost like We don't have to be right or wrong. That is not what, that is a long time ago. That is outdated bullshit. If you want to get better, feel better, and heal and have a calm nervous system, then have discernment. If the person is always going to blame you or you're always blaming someone else, then automatically that is suboptimal. And if you're always being blamed and you can't stop that person's perception, which you can't, be okay with being the villain. Try that hat on. And then question why you feel like you can't be the villain. There's always the why. I love the why. I ask people why all the time. It's probably my first word and know what came out of the womb. Why?
Where can people find you?
Oh, I don't know. Instagram and Facebook, Energy Holistic Health, and Evolve Energy Tribe on IG, and then Energy Holistic Health, Mindy Jones Lee on Facebook. And I have a lot of little communities, and I have a membership where we get together. And just yesterday, we talked about nervous system regulation. It's a fantastic call. And we work out together, and I have a humongous library where I dump all of my education that took years and lots of pain and lots of money to acquire. It's in there, and it's actually based off of clinical practice, not pharma funded endocrinology guidelines.
Yes, there's a lot of really juicy, good information in there. And believe it or not, we had just gone a year ago to a functional wellness summit, and they're just catching up on some information that you have been practicing for decades, which is really cool to kind of know that sometimes when you just don't trust that that logical self, and you kind of go with the gut of like, let's test this theory, that it can prove you right. Now, it has to come truly from the heart, and you have to really follow that. And sometimes those tools need to be massaged a bit before doing that. But that's what people who have walked the walk and talked the talk are here for. And I highly recommend checking Mindy's pages out and giving that a go, because she certainly has done that. Thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable, and appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for being an integral part. She's my unpaid therapist, by the way. My new therapist. But yes, she's been, you've been very, very essential, and you're very, very wise, and you have a fantastic gift of many, many things, but also seeing what is in front of you without having a bias. So you can kind of, your sniffer is very good. You can sniff to what is trauma and what is story, and you really have the best whenever you're talking about understanding where people are coming from. You have that like natural gift to say, hey, it looks and smells like this, but maybe they didn't mean it like this, and let's look at it from a different perspective. So, you've probably saved many people's lives by calming me down on a daily basis.
You heard it here first. I have a good sniffer. Thank you so much.